Hello, everyone. Today I am joined by a very special guest. He is an internet activist with 187 subscribers to his YouTube channel, also a regional director of American Atheists, director of the Phylogeny Explorer Project, and author of Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism. He is also one of the many people that inspired me to start doing the atheist content that I do on my channel, and is the sole person who helped me accept the term atheist and not have to have the negative connotations it has in today's society. So, without any further introduction, thank you, Aron Ra, for coming on today.
Well, thank you very much. I got to mention you mentioned my 187 subscribers.
I thought I said 187,000. Sorry. So it's been a long week for me, okay, and I got another long one tomorrow next week. So
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
uh, I swear I have it as 100. I copied directly what you said, and I only change I'm to he. That was it's literally the main change. So I have it as you said it to me. I only added the last second bit.
All right.
Um,
So, what will we talk about today?
well, I generally break it into kind of like what you do and kind of try to have it in sections. So like a little bit about yourself, then kind of more into what you kind of do, and then just some usually on religion in that, and atheism. So just I try to keep it organized. The first one is relatively easy. Why don't you just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, as described, I'm an internet activist, so to speak. I as soon as I got an internet connection, basically, when some 20 odd years ago, just shortly before Y2K, I remember getting involved in conversations with people that really disappointed my perception of how intelligent the average person is. I, I was amazed at the things that people were passing off, especially in politics and in particularly in public education. And I got a lot of Kent Hovind's kind of messages, and I felt compelled to contest all of this because the way that I see it is if you see somebody who's being deceived, if you see somebody who's being conned or lied to, then you're supposed to want to correct that error. You're doing that person a favor if you correct that error. And it's not your fault if they then say, oh, no, I have a right to believe that Benjamin Franklin was the first president of the United States, if I want to believe that. Okay, fine, you go out and do that. But for most people, you're doing them a favor, and it should be considered criminal or fraudulent when religion rolls over these people with all these deceptions, which they then extract money from. So, I mean, the definition of fraud really does apply here, and there's a moral outrage that I feel justified in feeling for this, and somehow or other that's taken off.
Okay. The next, yeah, you made me cringe there a little bit when you said Ben Franklin, first president. I'm a history major and going to school to teach social studies to high schoolers, so that made me cringe a little. Thank you.
Yeah, let's talk about social studies, shall we? I was just
Yeah.
in Austin a couple of days ago testifying before the Board of Education yet again, who has for the last 4 years, well, for much longer than that, really, they've been making a concerted effort to put in whatever language they could to imply that America is a Christian nation based on Judeo-Christian
Oh,
values, and that Moses and the Ten Commandments were the primary inspiration for the founding fathers who based this country on Judeo-Christian values,
God.
and they will not be reasoned with. I was last in a line of about preceded by a whole bunch of academic scholars and a couple of religious activists, and the board, of course, ignored every professor blankety blank PhD with expert specialty in in early American history or the secular politics or any of that. They just discarded it all to do as one of the testifiers said. One of the religious activists said that they should do: stand up to experts and vote with your emotions according to your faith, and that's exactly what they did.
Just no, because That's my favorite time period in American history is the Revolution and the founding of the country. So just
So you didn't know that all that Thomas Jefferson and Madison and Adams, that they were all devout Christians, that that the word Judeo-Christian, which didn't exist until the 1920s, was the way that they described themselves in the 1700s. You didn't know that?
that's why Jefferson, took the Bible and cut out all the magic crap and just kept the little parts. It said, I, and that's why Ben Franklin said, I don't even believe that Jesus Christ was the Messiah. I have an entire video on this where someone makes these claims and they use these quote mines, and it's like, no, just no.
So what I've told the Board of Education 3 times in a row is that every scholar knows better than the lies that you're putting into the textbooks. Everybody knows this isn't what it really is, but it doesn't matter. They're going to do that anyway.
Yeah.
Because, the truth doesn't matter if all that matters is what you believe and what you can make the kids believe, so that you got a fresh new batch of believers who can be just as deceived as you are. And then you can, when you talk your nonsense, you'll have an echo chamber to talk it back to you.
See, and that's the thing. I won't. I when I teach history, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I mean, I'm gonna have freshmen to seniors, and to me, when you're 14, you're old enough and mature enough to be able to handle the true history, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything. I
So
will say,
you're going to teach history in public school?
yeah,
Do
that's
you
what I'm
realize
going.
that you will be required now to teach? I mean, you're going to get a textbook that
Yeah,
tells you that this is a Judeo-Christian nation based on the Ten Commandments and the founding fathers, despite what the founding fathers may have said, that they were primarily influenced by Moses. You're going to have to teach that.
I, I please. I know you're being serious, but please tell me this is some sick joke. Please tell me it's a sick joke.
Like I said, there was a panel. There was a line of academic scholars that were telling the Board of Education that none of this is true, and that we have all of this proof from primary sources that none of this is true.
I,
And so
I
one of the guys came along, and one of the religious believers, one of the religious activists, came along and said, "Well, he knows that he doesn't need the primary sources of what the founding fathers themselves actually said in
oh
their own
God,
words,
no.
because he has the judgment of Justice Antonin Scalia in 2005 to say that the founding fathers were actually ardent Christians, and so that's what it is. This is a
No,
Christian country
no,
because."
just no, please. Please. Okay, I don't believe you're real, but God, if you're real, please somehow stop this. I mean, you're getting an atheist to beg you. Please stop it. Oh God, that's
Yeah.
just. Oh
Isn't that
man.
amazing? I mean, somebody in the Board of Education walked up to say hello to me, because we've all become familiar actors on this stage at this point. When
Yeah.
I went up before a whole bunch of people that had testified with me back in June and in 2014 and so forth. I mean, we're seeing the same people over and over again. So this guy comes up and says, "Well, just because we don't agree doesn't mean we can't be friends." And my problem is that this isn't a matter of opinion.
Yeah.
There is, I am right and you are lying. That's what this is. You know as well as I am that I am right and that you are lying. This is a I'm right and you're wrong on purpose situation.
Yeah. Just. I just. I'm still trying to like just wrap my head around that because I have linked in my one video that I did on it's the first Historic Friday because I figured I would start doing my history homework and turn them into YouTube videos to practice my teaching of history. I thought that would be a good way to do it. And I found a video where someone was claiming that, oh, these, founders were atheists. The closest they could get was a John Adams quote. And it was from one of his diaries. And basically, and it was actually not quote mined, believe it or not, but it was when he was like 26
Mm-hmm.
or 22, something like that. He wasn't that old. Um, So I'm like, he changed his views much later on in life. And I have links to every letter in full context. So literally, and I said something along the lines like, you don't have to believe me. Their words are in the description. There's the letters. Have fun.
Yeah.
Um,
And a couple of scholars did bring up John Adams, and a couple of the religious activists also brought up John Adams. They cited John Adams as saying, you know, how the Jewish people had spread their religion across the world and how this was some great benefit. But where, you know, John Adams is giving credence to the Jews for having spread their religion throughout the world, but it was also John Adams who said twice that the United States is not founded on the Ten Commandments, as you well know.
yeah, and
Right.
it's
So the Board of
part of it.
Education will ignore the primary source, that clear and unambiguous statement from one of the founding fathers, and prefer to defer to some bullshit they just made up so that they don't have to admit that ugly fact.
Well, here's my question. I would flat out ask them if a treaty is legally binding that the U.S. signed. I'm sure you probably
Yeah.
know which one I'm referring to.
Of course, they ignore that as well. That's just something they said to the Muslims to keep them in line. I don't know what the bullshit excuse is. But the fact is, they don't have any evidence at all to support their position, but they're going to support it anyway. Let me give you another example, because this is one I'm doing a video right now that talks about that, where I took all of their testimony and I'm uploading that video this evening. But there was another topic that was brought up this weekend, which was and was brought up in previous sessions as well. The cause of the Civil War, was it slavery, or was it a handful of different issues that were brought up as a matter of states' rights? They never had an ounce of evidence that it was a states' rights issue. They had every source everywhere, including every public speech made by and personal document written by Jefferson Davis, to say that it was that slavery was the one and only whole and sole reason for the Civil War. They have no reason to object to that and every reason to accept it, but the reason they won't is because the Board of Education wants to promote this idea of American exceptionalism,
Yeah.
which is you have to pretend, and I'm not kidding, this is the way I heard it phrased out loud. Somebody said that we can't be teaching anything that would be embarrassing to the United States, because America must always be seen as a shining beacon of what it means to be God blessed.
No.
So our history has to be muddied and distorted, and so that slaves, the Atlantic slave trade was renamed in our history books to the Atlantic Triangular Trade, and slaves were referred to in textbooks as immigrants and workers.
Wait.
Yeah.
I okay.
Meanwhile, the civil rights movement, we can just remove anybody that was notable or worthy in the civil rights movement. We can negate anybody that was not white as ever having done anything important. Only good white Christian people ever did anything good in history. So our Board of Education tried to omit Cesar Chavez, Thurgood Marshall, anybody that was not white and yet notable and admirable. All of these kind of references had to be literally whitewashed.
One person that comes to mind, and this is in the Revolution, who he's been, and I really hate the term whitewashing history. I really hate that term because I think sometimes it's overused.
But don't you think that it applies in this case?
Oh yeah, it does. And the person I'm going to mention, it strongly applies. I mean, I'm not saying that it shouldn't ever be used. There are times it needs to be used. And the one person who comes to mind that I always think of that he was whitewashed out of history, James Armistead Lafayette.
Well, you may be correct, because I don't know who that is.
He was a slave at the time. He went to his master and said, "Hey, I want to help out the Americans." And I said, "Okay, go ahead and help him out." He went to the Marquis de Lafayette. His name was originally James Armistead. He adopted Lafayette as the last name because the Marquis kind of looked at him as a son. And what he did was he basically became a spy. He waited on the generals because he's this dumb black slave. What does he know, right? You're talking in front of him, and he went back and gave him all kinds of information. I argue, 100% will argue, he was, in my opinion, and again, this is opinion based, the most important character in the Revolutionary War. He was helpful in getting back West Point after it was taken when Arnold turned coat.
And
With
at the
some of the
very least, he
information.
was a very instrumental spy.
Yeah, at least. I mean, he is at least one of the most important characters. I mean, that's not really debated too much. But I think, in my opinion, he is the most important one of them who never is talked about because he's been whitewashed out.
Yeah, our
I
Board of
read,
Education has decided 2 days ago that Hobbes didn't need to be mentioned as a source for the founding fathers because he wasn't as important as Moses, which needed to be listed as primary.
I just can I have okay. I'm known for not being the nicest with my words at times. Can I have 10 minutes alone with the Texas Board of
No,
Education?
we don't go there.
With the
We don't.
actual Board of Education from the 60s?
Yeah, we don't go there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't even joke about advocating violence
I,
anymore.
I yeah,
And we
no,
saw that. We actually saw that at the Board of Education meeting. There was one guy sporting a Dixie flag who was clearly out of his mind, and he was yelling at everybody on the board, literally yelling at everybody on the board
yeah,
that he's this racist Southerner or whatever, and he doesn't owe the one black man that was on the board, Alan. He said, "I don't owe you any reparations," and he said, "I don't owe you nothing." He said that to everybody in the group, and then he said that Satan has already spoken for all of them, and that the only person he owes is Jesus Christ. He thought he was the only Christian in the room,
oh
and
God, just
yeah, and then
I,
you're in a room full of powerful right wingers, boy, and
just
so, and then yeah, so somebody else comes up and said, and she was angry that her tribe had been written out of the history books, as a lot of
oh,
ethnicities are either poorly represented or misrepresented or have been eliminated entirely.
yeah,
And she made the comment that her family has a lot of rifles, and if they want to take her on, her family has all these rifles. Well, yeah, obviously the Board of Education is not impressed
no,
by this kind of a threat. And this other guy who attacked the Alamo defenders, he's a black man who's saying that Texas defenders had still had slavery where the Mexican Constitution did not. So if Mexico had won, then there would be no slaves in this. But if Texas wins, then they maintain slaves. And so he's literally yelling at everybody on the board that that the Alamo defenders were evil because that's what they're promoting. So the Board of Education is used to people being outraged and deranged. They don't care.
yeah, it's just
It seems that the only thing they do respond to sometimes is if you have letters behind your name. If you have a job where you are a professor in
yeah,
something in the specific field that you're talking about.
yeah,
And especially if you're elected, because if you're elected to something, somehow that gives you credence as an authority. How? I don't know.
I
Because if you have academic expertise in something and you disagree with them, well, they'll just ignore you. They'll ask you questions, they'll engage you, but they'll try to twist what you say so that they can turn it around to play for themselves, even if what you're saying is completely opposite of that. There was a good example that one of the people on the board somehow brought up uh, uh, Darwinian socialism or Darwinian socialist theory. That's what he said, Darwinian socialist theory, which does not even make sense.
I, I okay, I'm not a biology person. I make no secret on that. I have I have friends who do know it, and I talk to them. And the nice thing being on here is being at universities, I have access to a lot of the academic papers, so I can start looking up claims that people make because I have the academic university title. email, I can get to those behind the paywalls, which are nice because I have access to them through the university. And I can find those and go, hey, they're saying this. What is, because
Well, I
I'm,
can tell you what that is.
yeah,
Ken Mercer on the Board of Education is confusing social Darwinism, which is an economic concept
yeah,
that was initiated by Herbert Spencer,
okay,
who talked about it, eliminating people from certain economic stratus or statuses based on performance or whatever, and he called it social Darwinism because it was shortly after Darwinian theory had been published,
yeah,
and so this natural competition, right, was in the 1900s, or the early 20th century, was really popular idea. Now, Darwin had nothing to do with any of that.
yeah,
Darwin, now this was all in the context of the discussion on eugenics. Darwin was not a eugenicist by any stretch. Darwin argued against it even in his earliest works. And Hitler was not a Darwinist. Hitler had banned all of Darwin's books, ordered that they be burnt. He disagreed with Hitler was an out and out creationist.
oh yeah, oh yeah,
And that's very clear. But the people on the Board of Education will never admit that demonstrable truth. It doesn't matter how solidly you prove it, they're going to hold to what they're required to say and believe and will never admit the fact. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that John Adams says that this country was not founded on the Ten Commandments, because that disagrees with them. That's a primary source, an actual founding father. He's making a clear and unambiguous statement, and they're just going to flick that away and believe whatever the hell they want. That's the way that's set up.
I'm still just trying to fathom how. I mean, is academic honesty
Not
that
there.
far
Not
removed?
Yeah, it's not there. There is no academic honesty in this case.
I would love to, because I ultimately want to teach, early American history, you know, at a
Well, you're
university.
gonna get a very corrupted Orwellian version of it that you will be required to teach to your students.
Yeah, and the thing is that really makes me mad is when you mentioned the one girl who she was part of a tribe where they've been written out. I mean, the state of Kansas, you don't learn. I mean, the last time I think I remember hearing the Cons of Plains Indians mentioned, I was back in fourth grade. So that would have been 99, 2000
Yeah.
time frame because I'm 28. And that's the last time I ever heard them mentioned. And yet, where does Kansas get its name? The Kanza. It comes from the con. That's why if you look at cities and and counties in Kansas, I mean, just down the road, if you go just down the road a ways and cross Turtle Creek Boulevard here in Manhattan, you're in Pot County, which Pot County is short for Potawatomi, which was a branch, I believe, of the Kanza Indians. I could be wrong on that. So if I am, I'm sorry. I've been a while since I've studied the Kanza Indians, so I could be wrong on that. But I think they were a tribe of the Kanza Plains Indians.
So are we still talking about geographically Kansas, or because I thought you said Manhattan?
Yeah, I'm in Manhattan, Kansas.
Okay, Manhattan, Kansas. Okay,
Yeah,
so I'm thinking Manhattan.
yeah. Everyone. Yeah, I go to
Yeah. And
Kansas.
so at that point, I would have thought you'd be referring to the Powhatans.
Yeah. That's another story for another whitewash of history that
Isn't
you
it?
actually you did in one of your videos. I don't remember which one, but you did a good analysis of that, and it's like, yeah, no, that's just yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, but
So you,
back to the questions that I had written out because we got a little sidetracked there, but it was still a good discussion and a discussion that needs to be had. It's just I'm just still I'm in shock that they would do that. I mean, they're trying to.
everything I ever hear from religious advocacy is an outrage.
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
don't understand how anybody can endorse this or side with it.
Yeah.
But this is just par for the course.
Yeah. It's, I mean, the more I've looked into like what our history is, what the United States history is, and that, and to me, the black marks need to be taught, because it shows us, hey, we aren't perfect, we've screwed up, but here's what our mistakes are.
And
Now let's learn from it.
it's
But
important that we know.
yeah,
People want to say that this will never happen in America because America is this wonderful thing, this
why?
concept that's always been, according to American exceptionalism, has always been divinely inspired and all of that. But our country, and mind you, I say this as somebody who still feels a patriotic value for being American.
Yeah, as I
I,
think most everyone here probably does have that
I
little bit.
well, yeah, I would
Ah,
like to be that. I'm a little outraged lately because America is not living up to my standards. Certainly not
yeah.
now,
Oh yeah.
but really, it never has. America's never been up to my standards. And what's really outrageous to me is this: I was fed this lie. Now, once upon a time, it was true that Americans had a policy. Whether this was actually in practice or not is negotiable, but we had a policy that we wouldn't negotiate with terrorists. So we wouldn't torture prisoners. We
Yeah.
had these ideals that we claimed to live up to, and I was all about that. And
Yeah.
then in recent years, we don't even pretend to do that anymore. As Donald Trump said, the American dream is dead. Everything that made America great is over with, and and we've done it to ourselves. But it's
It,
important that people understand how bad we have always been on specific issues, on
yeah.
specific facts. I mean, like what we've done. There was a series of documentary videos that I was very glad that I saw because I wouldn't have known otherwise. That it covered what we did to the Native Americans, what we did to
Oh,
Jews, what we did to women, what we did to Mormons, what we did to Catholics, the Irish,
oh yeah.
and to Japanese, and so forth. After the Civil War and in the early up to the early part of the 1900s. It was important to know what kind of anti-constitutional criminality this country had legislated against all these demographics.
Yeah. Yeah. It's. I mean, I got in trouble in school for saying this, but I stand by what I said. My history teacher did not like it in high school. Um, because what I said is when we studied World War II, I asked, and we studied the bombing of Pearl Harbor. I asked this because we didn't cover it at all, and I asked them where are the American concentration camps that we put up for the Japanese. There's no other way to put it. That's what they were.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
and he's like, well, we don't need to learn about that. I'm like, what? No,
We don't need to learn about that.
that's
Okay.
what he told me.
When I
I
first
did
got
not like
involved
this
with,
history teacher anyway. I thought he was an idiot, and that was just more proof to the fact. I'm like, and I had people come to me and ask me about it, and I didn't sugarcoat it. They said, "What do you mean American concentration camps?" Only the Nazis had them. Said, See, Nazis had death concentration camps. We just didn't gas everyone."
yeah.
And I showed them a picture of someone from the Japanese internment camps, and I said, "Where do you think this picture was taken?" You want to know what their first response was?
Mm.
Auschwitz.
Hmm.
And I'm like, nope, that's here in the US. And they're like, you're kidding. I go, no, that's what I was referring to. And they're like,
Yeah, yeah.
holy
Famously,
crap.
George Takei, the Sulu from Star Trek.
Yeah.
He's become quite a political activist in recent years, and he was a child in one of these internment camps.
Wow. I
He
did
was
not know
physically
that.
in one.
I did not know that. And yet we're whitewashing it out. I mean, I heard someone um, tell me, and they're 18, so they just got out of high school, that the Trail of Tears has been cut from the books.
Yeah, yeah.
I heard that, and I'm like, and Jackson is now painted as this great guy, and I'm like, Andrew Jackson, a
Our
guy who
first Trinitarian Christian president, by
just
the way.
I The only thing I'll say, Jackson did good, and it's only one thing, and it wasn't really so much what he did as some of the other policies that Congress passed and did, and that was he's the only president we've ever been in the black in. Everyone else we've been in red. So he's the only. That's the only thing I can say good about him is that. Beyond that, I really can't think of two. I think he's one of the worst presidents we ever had.
Well, somehow I realized that this conversation was going to go to political really quickly.
I
Yeah, I can't comment on the financial situation during Andrew Jackson's term, but I would dare say that we've had a couple of times when we were in the black since then.
okay.
But I would have to have numbers prepared to have that.
Yeah. I didn't. I mean, from what I've been able to find, and if I'm wrong, someone please correct me. I will fully admit that I am wrong on that if that is the case. But as far as I know, he's the only one, and that's because we loaned a lot of money to I think it was France when they were fighting England. Was it France or Spain? And they were fighting England, and we loaned them money, and they and them paying us back is kind of how we got out of that fiasco. But that's
So somebody got in trouble recently for saying that America was not all it was we can't say that America was that great. This was a politician because it wasn't great for everybody.
yeah.
And people just misrepresented it. So you say that America's not that great. What's wrong? So what's wrong with America? And they completely missed the message that at the time, the good old days that you want to go back to, that a lot of Republicans want to go back to, is the good old days when only straight, white, rich Christian men had rights.
Yeah. I can't think of the show, but there was a clip from it. I cannot. I honestly it's like the newsroom or something, but I know that's not right. But it's the guy who's asked, "Why is America great?" And the guy flat out says, "We're not." And then he goes into all these reasons as to where we fall on stuff. And it's I looked up all the facts that they're accurate from that show. Those stats are accurate. And
Don't you wish that wasn't just television?
yeah, I mean, I felt angry at first because I'm like, it's like someone just put the newsroom. So yeah, it was this clip, and it's super powerful.
Yeah,
And
I've seen the clip. I think it's Jeff Daniels.
I think you're right on that. But
Yeah.
it is
I didn't know the show. I hadn't watched the show.
yeah.
I haven't watched a
All I've seen
television
is that
show in
clip.
better than 20 years.
Yeah, all I've seen is that clip, and and I watch it still to this day, and I get angry at it because it's like, why? Why are we here? We can do better than this. Yeah, I did not. This went a completely different direction than I had planned out, but yeah, I'm okay with that. It's a good discussion that we've had, and it's on a topic I know, so it's just. But like I said, that's just.
We should get back to your questions.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, good talk there though. But yeah, it's just man, that's depressing. But yeah, the next question is, how did you become an atheist? That was the next question on the list.
Yeah, how to become an atheist was it's never a quick thing, except for maybe Ricky Gervais. I think he's the only quick atheist there ever was. You know, if somebody goes from a hardcore Jesus believer to straight up atheist just on a single clue. But he was a young child, according to his own story. Most of us don't figure that out until we're, well after puberty, at least, if not at adulthood. And it's such a deeply ingrained delusion is hard to walk away from all at once. Now, I didn't realize I became an atheist instantly without realizing what an atheist was. That's my thing. I spent 15 years misidentifying myself because I've been lied to about what the word atheist means.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was a reborn Christian once upon a time. On the day I was reborn, I remember wandering around in a kind of a euphoria. I was dizzy, feeling empowered, feeling aloft, feeling drunk on this feeling itself. And I remember asking my friend, who is now, by the way, an ordained Southern Baptist minister, but we were both 19 years old at that time. So this is just the different directions that we went. I asked my friend, how do I know that this feeling that I'm experiencing is really the power of Jesus and not some other source, maybe generated within myself or from something else? And so he grabbed me by both shoulders and with a huge beaming smile told me to just keep telling myself it's Jesus until you believe it.
Oh God, yeah, that's
He's part of the ministry that believes in fake it till you make it.
oh,
Just lie to yourself until you believe your own lie. And that's it. But when he said, keep telling yourself it's Jesus until you believe it, that moment, I realized that's so dishonest that it was my last instant as a Christian.
yeah. I was in like fourth grade when something like that happened to me. It was like Sunday school or Bible or VBS, something like that. But I was at church and I was brought up Lutheran, although I went to more of a fundamentalist Southern Baptist more often.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in fourth grade and they took us outside. We sat down and just listened to nature for a bit. And then they asked us what we heard and why we believed in God. And I'm like in fourth grade, so I'm like 9 years old. And I say, I don't know if I believe. And the Sunday school teacher told me flat out, oh, you believe, you just don't realize it. And I even at 9, I'm like, that's dishonest. But I just kept believing because I was always told, oh, God's real, God's real. And then I actually had an application with a check written, and I did not mail the check, and I'm glad I didn't, to a seminary school. I was applying to go to seminary. And that's at the same time I had this check written. A friend of mine challenged me to read the Bible cover to cover. And I'm like, okay, I'll wait on mailing the check in case I do leave the faith. But I was like, no, I won't leave the faith. So I should have probably mailed it. But looking back, I got up into I think Second Kings, and finally I just was like, I can't do any more mental gymnastics. It's impossible. And I
You
just
got
was
up
like,
to Second Kings.
yeah, I made it. I was doing everything in my power to find a justification for it, but too many things just did not add up. And I'm like, I'm like, I
You
can't.
got much, much further than I did, my friend.
I was, because I was so devout. I wanted
I
it.
was in a later chapter of Genesis, but still not out of Genesis. I don't remember exactly where it was before I finally threw the book across the room in disgust. Because it's not possible that this was written by a supreme being, a God of love, a God of infinite wisdom, wouldn't have anything to do with and would want to be far removed from this crap.
Yeah, and the friend of mine who did it, he never talked about it, but he would ask me where I was. I would say like, oh, I'm in Exodus, whatever, Genesis, whatever, wherever I was, and he'd go, okay, keep reading, and that's all he ever said. He was not going to influence my reading of it. He wanted me to come to everything on my own, and I have to thank him for it. He was the best thing that ever happened to me, to be honest.
I have people still telling me that I would convert to Mormon if I were to read the Book of Mormon. And these people are so how okay. The Book of Mormon is based on the idea that the Bible is true, right? You know, and
Yeah,
that's just not just the New Testament, but the New Testament is also contingent on the Old Testament being true. And right, so what if the Old Testament is absolutely certainly a complete crock of shit made up by people who had no idea whatever of what they were talking about, and thus the New Testament doesn't either have any idea. And the character of Jesus, let's assume for a moment, just for the laughable possibility that he may have been real, let's assume there was an actual Jesus, because I don't actually believe that. I don't believe there was a.
yeah,
I think if you were to go back in time, you would find a handful of people that were a handful of different people that were the basis for the story of Jesus.
exactly.
And that if you collected all of them and brought them forward in time and showed them the movie Jesus Christ Superstar, that none of them would recognize this movie as being about them.
Yeah, yeah. It's there's. I mean, I think Jesus was a compilation of people, and one of my favorite questions to ask, because obviously me loving history, is what year was Jesus born?
Well, he
What
was born before 4 BC and after
after
6
60?
CE at the
Yes.
same time.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I sometimes am generous, and I'll use, I believe, it's the Julian calendar, which has Herod's death at 1 CE. So I'll give them 5 years, but they still got a 5 year discrepancy either way, and it doesn't float. I mean, even being as generous as I can be with giving them the later date, but it's mostly associated that it was 4 BC. That's one of my favorite questions to ask.
Yeah, start with when was he born and then go to where was he born.
Yeah.
right?
And then
And
you
where did he spend his childhood? Which country of the collection did he spend his childhood in? And then when did he die? Because we can't even get that either.
yeah.
And then there's so many. We're not going to get into
Yeah,
mythicism on
yeah,
this show.
yeah.
There's
That was not an intent of mine. That was sorry. That was
too much to go into
oh
there,
yeah. There is so much.
especially when you go against something that is so universally accepted.
Yeah,
It's like I don't know what to tell you. If you were raised, let's say you're a professional historian, you were raised as a Christian, and you never even questioned whether Jesus existed. You just always assumed that there was this guy named Jesus. You don't believe he's God necessarily, but you know you think there was this guy, this cult leader, back in the first century who did all of these things supposedly. And for whatever reason, you think that this story, and not the miracles, but falsely attributed miracles, but they're attributed to a real guy. You never question that, and you become a professional historian. So of course you still believe that. But when asked why do you believe Jesus was real, it always comes down to you always believed that Jesus was real because you were told that he was real, because you were told that everybody believes that he was real.
yeah.
Is that a reason to believe he was real?
Nope.
I mean, do we have anything other than that? Because everybody else, we got something, even Socrates and Plato and Pontius Pilate, we have other things to indicate their existence.
And
Jesus, butt kiss,
it,
fuck all,
is it
nothing.
Plato or Socrates that there's even debate about whether he existed because all we have is
Socrates.
Socrates. Okay, I always
Initially, for a long time, Plato's Republic, I think it was the only source for the existence of Socrates. But since then, there has been another source.
okay.
I've had to question whether Hypatia ever existed, because for the longest time, I only had one source for her, and it was not a reliable source.
Yeah.
Now, I've since found out that there are others that corroborate, and that's good, because
Yeah.
she's a wonderful character from history, and I really wanted her to be real, but I had to face the fact that the one source I had was somebody who could not possibly have had direct information about her, and therefore I had to distrust the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm right there with you. Yeah, and when you describe the person who wants to be a professional historian or professional historian, I'm like, did you get a hold of my backstory? Because I was the same way, and then I was presented with the evidence against in the mythicist position, and I'm like, to me, it was the same way with the Bible.
So would you say that the mythicism movement is growing, or is it not?
I believe it's growing.
Okay, are you a historian yet?
No, I'm a
Okay.
sophomore.
I can't yet say that we have historians admitting that the mythicism movement is growing.
It will be in about 5 years probably is when I'll have my BS in history, because I'm getting my BS in education first. Then I'm going to get my BS in history. So,
5 years?
Yeah,
You're going to make us wait that long.
I'm sorry. If I could get it done, I could theoretically go for the Bachelor of Science in History first, and then my education, which would get me in there in about 3 years.
Yeah, we're not going there. I'm not. I don't mean to.
No, you're fine. Yeah.
Okay.
What
were your other questions, sir?
Yeah. Well, it's fair, but yeah, the next other question.
Have we done more than one question so far?
We've done two. Tell me a little about yourself and why are you an atheist? So that's where we got.
I never got to answer the second question fully.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I gotta finish this. Once I lost the idea of Christianity based on the dishonesty of my friend's statement, I had to ponder whether there was a God or not, and then I had to look for the reason to believe that there was a God. And so I looked at other religions like Islam and Judaism and Hinduism, for example. I'd read one of the books by Sri Prabhupada, for example, and I thought that this was very moving and inspiring until I get about halfway through, and it's just all about the mythology of the gods, basically, and I just don't have any interest in any of that. I wanted to know how things actually worked and how I can show that this is the way they actually work. Because for me, if you can't show that the information is correct, if it might just be imaginary, it's useless. There's no value in that at all. So that eliminates every sermon given by any priest in any religion, period. They're all useless. Until you can show me the truth of it, then there is no truth of it, and we're done. But because I'd been lied to about what an atheist is, I was told that an atheist was a nihilist. I was told that atheists believe in nothing. I was told that atheists worship the devil, that they have an unreasonable position that won't even consider a possibility if it's not absolutely proved. And all of this is lies. An atheist is just someone who is not convinced that an actual deity really exists. And what the reason I say an actual deity is because a lot of people say, well, I believe there's something. We all believe there's something.
Yeah.
Is it a god?
Yeah.
Is it a magical, anthropomorphic, immortal? You know,
Yeah.
and if you don't believe that, then you're atheist. Well, and I've had people said, well, just because I don't believe in God doesn't make me an atheist. Yeah, that's exactly what makes you an atheist.
It was hearing you say that is what made me go, huh, I am an atheist. Because I always said agnostic because I was like, I'm not sure if there's something out there. I mean, I was mislabeling myself as that. And then when I heard you, I'm like I think it was actually on the atheist experience where you said something on that. And I love another one of your quotes.
For 15 years, I described myself as I self-identified as an agnostic pagan for Christ.
Yeah, that's an interesting combo. But you're right. I mean, for the longest time when I left, I had the idea of a soul for the longest time because it was that one piece of the past I did not want to give up. It was that comforting thought. And I finally was like, you know what? There is no evidence for this. I cannot show this to be real. I can't prove it in any way. So how can I claim to believe it? And that's why I love your quote of the if you can't show it, you don't know it. It is I love it.
While people will challenge me on this, I have to back it up with this statement. Since you brought that up, I got to bring in this up too. If you can't validate your claims to any degree at all, by any means whatsoever, you cannot actually know what you think you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have a friend who identifies as Christian, but he's made a couple of admissions on that, which I wish other people were honest enough to admit. He said, I believe that because I like to believe that, not because I think it's true, is one of the things. And when I bring up the concept of mythicism, he gets really upset. He says, I want there to be some schmuck that all of this is based on. Let there be some schmuck. And if I tell him that, no, it's all based on a conglomeration of different things and people hodgepodge together, and then one legend gets, or two legends get kind of absorbed into one. The story of John the Baptist, for example, becomes a sequel story where John the Baptist has to now baptize Jesus, and he has to attribute all his credibility to this new character because John the Baptist was a very popular character, but you can only take him so far. And now you have this new character and you have to integrate them together. Oh, my friend just went livid over that. He wants to think that if you read the Bible, that the stories in the Bible are going to be true to a point, that all of it has a kernel of truth to it. To find out that some stories have no kernel at all, that there was, he wants to take every story he reads and say, I wonder exactly what really happened. What if there's none of this? None of it happened at all. Not a word of it. It all came from a different myth about a different person, and it was just appropriated. He doesn't want that. That throws him off. He wants there to be some schmuck that this whole thing is based on.
I think that's why it took me so long to leave the faith, because I was trying everything in my power to just go, no, it's true. Because once I finally went, no, this is all a lie. I mean, I felt like my whole world just crumbled underneath me and I had the rug pulled out from under me. It was just, that's how it felt to me, because mind you, I was devout enough that I was willing to pay, I think it was like a $35 or $45 application fee to go to seminary school.
Wow.
So it was,
but you know what, you would have actually gotten something out of that, because the strongest advocates for atheism in the anti-theist movement today are people who have been missionaries or have been in seminary or have been actual practicing preachers
before. So and I was studying the Bible and I got to know it very well inside and out, and that's really where I love the faith.
I once told an atheist, I asked her about, she had told me that she was an atheist, and I asked her about certain biblical quotes and everything, and She had no knowledge at all of the Bible whatsoever. I'm like, well, how can you call yourself a decent atheist if you don't know the Bible? And because I thought, atheists have to know the Bible better than Christians do.
Yeah.
She responded, why do I have to read mythology? Why do I have to be studied in mythology to know that I don't believe it? I'm like, well, you got me. You're right. You're right. I shouldn't have to labor you with this.
Yeah. And that's where, like, I love to look at the, theist arguments and the theological arguments and go through and break them down. So it's that's always fun for me because I have the background on that, and some of them are some things that, like, one of my favorite ones that I did was I looked at the once saved always saved argument, and that's complete BS. Even if the Bible is real and we grant it that it's real, the once saved always saved doesn't work.
How could it work?
Exactly. It's really, from what I was able to find, it goes to one verse and one verse only, probably the most famous verse of all time, John 3:16, because it says, if you believed on him, you shall not perish and have everlasting life. So once you believe, you're granted everlasting life, and that can't be taken away.
Until you don't believe anymore, and then you lose it.
Exactly. But they believe that even if you leave, you believed, so you were granted everlasting life. That's where the whole point of that argument comes from. And it's like, that is so flimsy. It's like, that is so easy to.
Do you ever wonder, even though you were a believer yourself, and I'm sure there was a point in your life, was there a point in your life where you actually believed this?
Yes. I think up till like fourth grade, I think that's kind of when I went
to fourth grade.
It was because of that BBS, that Sunday school teacher, when they told me, oh, you believe it. And then I just kind of thought, that can't be right. But I was like, I have to believe this because that's what I've been told. But I truly did believe it.
I love the fact that there's so many of us atheist activists were not able to maintain a belief beyond 11 years old.
I still believed it, and I was still active in the church and the youth groups and everything. But I always had that, kind of gnawing doubt at me, where it's just like, do I really believe? And I never really truly.
Why would your everlasting soul, forever lasting soul be based on whether you're going to get it, not gradations of punishment, but you're either going to get impossible rewards, which are just stupid great. You're going to 15 blowjobs a day, right? On the one side, if you believe, and you will have, your flesh seared off your bones 3 times nightly if you don't believe.
Yeah, and I will.
Why the hell would that even be? I mean, if a God really existed, how could any God worthy of worship allow for such a stupid dichotomy based not on your actions, but on your beliefs?
Yeah, and I agree. I never understood that. That's one that I always struggle with. But I will say this, even though I was brought up fundamental Southern Baptist, I was a heretic in that because I was I was one of the rare Southern Baptists who was actually an annihilationist. I was never. I left the hellfire and brimstone behind. I was like, I became an annihilationist because it was, to me, I struggled with that. I was like, how can a loving God torture people forever? And I heard the annihilationist argument, and to me, that to an extent made sense at the time. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Your soul just evaporates, but it's, but it still falls into what hell is with eternal separation. So that kind of, to me, made, and looking back, I always cringe when I look back at what I believe. I'm like, oh God, I can't believe I used to advocate this stuff. I'm an idiot. I look back at it and I'm like, great.
There's something to be said about the way we mature.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that I've gone through a number of incarnations in my life where I'd have a complete change of position, not just once, It's happened a couple of times where there'll be a significant change in my life where I'm not that same person anymore. I don't believe those same things anymore, and there's things that there's a number of aspects that if I would go back to myself, if I could meet myself, yeah, in my 20s or in my teens, I would be so adamantly against everything that guy was.
Same here. I hate to admit this, but I was okay. My former parents, because they disowned me, so they aren't my parents anymore. Because of coming out as trans, I was brought up
Now, this is something
fundamentally.
you brought up in your channel a number of times. Is that right?
Just recently, I did my coming out video when
Because
I
I've got
got
some questions for you. But
okay.
like,
I'm okay with that. But no, I just
this might be for another podcast though, because I'm going to just completely flip, flip the
yeah,
tables
no,
on.
it's fine. I mean, yeah, we haven't even gotten through. We've only got through two questions. We've had it for an hour. So I was, hey, that's the other part that I didn't mention in the pre-show about this. Yes, I had the list of questions, but I kind of just take it wherever it can go at times. Like if you ever bring up a point, like you brought up the social studies point, and that was, I'm like, that's something worth talking about. So it's kind of whatever comes up to. The questions I have are more just to try and keep a script if like nothing like that happens. But
Yeah, I met somebody yesterday that really pushed my envelope.
okay,
Though I'm sure she didn't realize it. There's a woman that she identifies as lesbian, but she's married to a man. She refers to him as a man, but also says he's trans. Clearly born male. How is it trans? I don't know. She's using male um, what pronouns. She's
yeah,
using male pronouns. So I'm confused. And she said, if I were ever to leave him, I would date another, and go to somebody else. I would date a woman. But for right now, I'm with this man. He's my exception, and the man is apparently trans, but I don't know how trans. I don't understand any of it. But the fact that I don't understand any of this, and for everything that I can tell, they are both they're young, good-looking couple. They're just there's nothing odd about them that I can see outwardly, except that maybe they both have the same haircut.
yeah. I mean, I would ask. I'm just wondering, was the person who was trans? Were they trans female or trans male? Because trans male would be born female, transition to male. Trans
Well,
female
I
would
can
be
only I can only give you my opinion based on my estimate of their physicality, but
okay. Yeah, it's
the woman I'm talking to was always physically female. Her husband, which she refers to as her husband, was always physically male. So
okay.
far as but the thing is, I've met a couple of couples that were like this. That while they don't necessarily identify as a different gender, they do identify as gender queer, if that
Yeah.
makes any sense. Which is
Yes.
why it's one of the things I don't like about the LGBTQ and add under whatever
Yeah.
letters you want to
Yeah.
throw onto that. To me, the word queer not only encapsulates everything you've already got in that letter set, but also includes pretty much any other letters you want to throw onto
Yeah.
it. So, I mean,
Yeah.
for me, being outside of that sphere entirely, as long as I don't use the word queer as a pejorative, I think I should be able to use that word queer just because I
Yeah.
can't remember the sequence of letters involved.
Yeah, no, it's for me. I mean, I would look at it as, and there's a way to tell, like if you're using it as a more descriptive term, so just someone identifies as queer or whatever, or a pejorative, and you're doing it to insult someone.
Well,
Um,
people will say sometimes that we should reclaim this letter and or this word, and I'm thinking, well, you don't need to reclaim it. I'm going to give it to you
yeah,
because it's really a gift to me. It's just easier for me to say and to think about. But the thing
yeah,
is, as I say, I meet this perfectly normal looking couple, but to listen to their backstory, it was a little strange that this is the quasi both heterosexual and homosexual lesbian relationship that really isn't that, but so it fucked with my reality enough that it caused me to realize that the most important message, I think, is that it doesn't fucking matter.
yeah.
So I just let go of that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and it's yeah, I mean there's a lot even in the LGBTQ plus, however you want to refer to it as. I usually just go LGBT.
Wouldn't it be
Um,
better if you could just say queer or gender queer? Because
yeah, it's
I'm
it's a
hoping
lot out.
I want to get somebody from that community to say yes, it's okay to use that word.
Yeah, I I mean I don't use it to describe myself, but I know other people who do, and it's just there's a lot. Like I said, there's a lot that I'm still learning about everything in this and all that. So it's but yeah, back to the questions that I had since we only got through two of them. What made you want to
We're an hour
become?
into this show, man. You only got two. Are we going to do two questions an hour?
I hope not. I think I got like over 15, so I hope not.
Oh, wow.
But
I'm going to run out of beer before you run out of questions.
yeah, the next question is, what made you want to become a science communicator? And I think you kind of touched on that a little bit with the telling me about yourself part.
Well, if I could summarize this, and I'm going to try to go quick because I know you got a bunch of questions. The reason that I wanted, did you say why I wanted to be a science teacher?
Communicator.
Communicator. Well, because for one thing, it wasn't until I encountered Carl Sagan in his original TV series Cosmos that anybody ever expressed anything to me that really clicked, that made sense, because it was demonstrably true. And as I said before, the only value information can have is how accurate you can show it to be. And here I've got somebody who's explaining things to me that I can actually show are true. That matters. And it just doesn't just matter for the information that I'm bringing in, but also has practical applicability so that I can use that information to continue to succeed at something. I've always said that only practical information has accurate information has practical application. It's necessary that it be true.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. And the next one is, what is your favorite subject to communicate as far as science goes, and why? Like chemistry, biology, archaeology, paleontology. Which
Specifically, my passion for whatever reason. This is going to be a strange thing. A lot of people don't understand this. I like. Let me see how I can phrase this in a way that people will understand and make sense of. We have people, and I've met them, who here in this state, in Texas, cannot tell you what states or countries lie across our borders in any direction. I'm confused at that. I need to know where
how?
the hell I am. Okay, I need to know if I were to start going northwest. I need to know what border am I gonna cross, and where will I be? Right,
So,
and in the same respect,
so they only know Texas. So like, what's north of Texas? I don't know.
the people I'm talking about, I would be surprised if they could draw you a map of what Texas looks like. And
Oh,
Texas is easily the most recognizable state in the entire country.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say that in Florida, and I think Colorado is another one that I can either recognize because it's a
Colorado
square.
is a square.
Yeah, that's it. That's the old.
So California and Alaska and Hawaii.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And
those are the five states that anybody could
yeah.
recognize on a map. But the people I'm talking about might not even be able to get those.
Oh God.
But I need to know where I am in history as well. So I need to have a concept of which came first, radio or automobiles, for example. Right? I need to know the chronology of our human history. I need to know where I sit in that. And so there's just certain things about it. Having a map in my head. I don't like that we have GPS that tells you to turn left here and turn right there, because you will never learn where the fuck you are if that's what you have to follow. Now, when I was a young man, we didn't have GPS. So in order for me to go anywhere, I had a map that was staked out on my wall with little push pins, and I would have to memorize everywhere I had to be, so that I wouldn't live in a city for more than a week before I knew everything in that city. I knew where I was in it.
Yeah.
That's important to me. So I want to know where I am in time. I want to know where I am geographically. I want to know where I am in terms of history. but I also want to know where I am in terms of taxonomy. I want to know how I'm related to other things. It stuns me that other people are unable to play the Sesame Street game of, one of these things is not like the other. Would you put up a sheep, a goat, and a dog?
Yeah. Okay.
Or if you
Yeah.
put up a dog, a cat, and a cow?
Did you see the? I maybe think of the whole Carol bit, but did you see where he put up a bunch of pictures of? I think they were all like squirrels or something, and asked a 5-year-old to answer it, and the 5-year-old said that they weren't all the same kind,
Yeah.
and he was trying to argue. That was just like, I'm like, well, looks like your 5-year-old test actually can't even pass your own standards. Sorry, that was just something I
So
saw.
what
And
if you have a red squirrel, a fox squirrel, and a chipmunk? What do you do with that?
I don't know.
All right, bring on your next question. Let's get through these things.
Yeah. Sorry, it was. What made you want to start teaching people about evolution?
My fascination with taxonomy, which really goes into the previous question, but somehow I managed not to answer. My favorite aspect of teaching evolution is the way that we're all connected, where we are taxonomically, where do we line up in the tree of phylogeny. And I want to see how everything else matches up, and where do I have a closer relation with rats than I do with sloths or cattle. These are the things this is something that interests me, and probably maybe nobody else. I don't know. I've never encountered another person who has this interest in taxonomy that I do, but I've always had it ever since second grade.
Okay.
Somebody, my second grade teacher gave me a book on dinosaurs, and it gave me that book had a cladogram in it. It was basically a tree of life illustrated, and it made sense to me that, of course, birds would be closer related to reptiles than to mammals. I mean, how obvious is that?
Yeah.
Right. But people don't get that, and they don't want to. It's like I said, when you can't tell the cat and the dog are closer together than the cow, and the cow is closer to the sheep and the goat than they are to a lizard. You really can't tell that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. The next question is, what is your favorite or strongest piece of evidence for evolution in your opinion? Like, what is in your opinion on that? Or should I say evidences?
Don't pluralize it like that.
I'm sorry.
All right. So, my strongest evidence for evolution would be the first evidence of evolution. And Kent Hovind, I tried to explain this to Kent Hovind, who is determined not to understand it. He knew going into the conversation he was not going to understand it because he's meant not to understand it. He's deliberately not understanding it. But when Darwin came along and explained evolution, the reason that there was something to it, to his explanation, was that there was already taxonomy. Carolus Linnaeus in the 1700s, he was a creationist, and he's trying to classify life forms, and he thinks he's going to get them all into created kinds, several separate boxes of created kinds, but instead they all ended up in nested hierarchies, which did not make any sense from a creationist standpoint. And he had no explanation for that. And he challenged the scientific community of his day to explain why this is. And nobody could explain that until Darwin came along.
Yeah.
And Darwin, coincidentally, not only did he provide the explanation for Linnaeus, but it was also a revelation, because he goes back and he looks at the Systema Naturae, which was written by Linnaeus, when he realized that new species could evolve, and he had the mechanism by which that could happen. He looked back at Systema Naturae, and suddenly everything made sense.
Yeah.
Fuck, this all works. And that's what the rest of the world realized. This actually works. This makes sense of the mystery that Carolus Linnaeus could not explain. So that is the greatest explanation, or the greatest evidence of evolution, is taxonomy. And also, it's the death knell for creationism. And I don't want to get into why this is, but I've explained this in a video called The Phylogeny Challenge. If you know anybody watching has a creationist friend or father or whatever that wants to argue for creationism, have them watch The Phylogeny Challenge and get back to me. I don't anticipate any emails from any of these people because nobody can answer this question.
Yeah. And the next question I have is, why do you feel people deny plain and evident facts that have been, demonstrated time and time again, yet they'll believe things such as like young Earth creationism and flat Earth?
There's something about being conditioned to believe something, and you're told since you're a small child, younger than 8 years old, that you must believe this, and if you don't believe this, you'll be punished. That this compromises or even thwarts your rational ability of cognizance so that you just accept it and you never recover from the damage that it's done to your critical faculties. That's where I think that comes from.
Okay. How do you feel we can combat this anti-science mindset that people have?
You may notice, or you may have already noticed, that when you try to rationalize with somebody, when you try to help somebody out of faith, when you try to reason with them, they get angry at you because they want to maintain this belief. And they get particularly angry when you try to reason with children. But they're totally okay with telling children that everybody is a liar except for the religious liars, and that they should not believe anybody telling the truth. They should only believe the liars. And somehow that's justification. As if it's gotten to the point where if I am talking to a child and I told them the truth, I feel somehow criminal or that it's inappropriate to tell the child the truth. I should let the parents lie to them to the point that the child is no longer able to think literally on any rational or critical level, and then try to undo the damage. That's somehow fair.
Yeah,
None of that is right at all. I should be able to tell children, I've done this one time and I've been criticized heavily for it. There was a 4-year-old child at the Reason Rally 2016 who was handing out CDs about Jesus movies. Like, a Christian group just dropped on my fucking door today. Somebody pinned this on my door today. Didn't ring my doorbell, but they stuck this on my door. Yeah, Jesus movies. So this 4-year-old child is handing out Jesus CDs or DVDs or whatever the fuck they are at the Reason Rally 2016. And she hands them to me, and I knelt down to get down to her level, and I was like, so what is these? What are these? And she says, these are Jesus movies. And I said, well, no, thank you. I don't want them. I only want things that are true. And she cried. I didn't even tell her that what she believes in was false. I just said, I only want to hear things that are true.
Yeah.
And I only said that because both of her parents were standing right fucking there.
Okay, yeah.
And I was waiting for either of them to challenge me, which of course neither of them would.
Yeah.
Well, and why would they? You want it exposed to your 4-year-old that you're a lying piece of shit?
Yeah, I know. And we do present evidence. Like there were some Jehovah's Witnesses here at K-State a while ago, and I was talking with them, and I was going into, the historical arguments, how these things didn't exist, how the flood we can trace back to the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Tower of Babel we can trace back to where it was. And
they found his tomb, by the way.
Which one?
Gilgamesh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a real guy.
Yeah, I knew he was a real
Gilgamesh is real. Jesus is not.
Yeah,
and neither is Moses.
Yeah, and it's because we actually touched on that in history, so I did know that because we did cover it when we talked on it. Which
have you and I met?
One time we've talked.
It wasn't earlier this month.
No, it was. Okay. It was.
I was in Kansas earlier this month.
No, yeah, you were in Kansas City. I would have loved to have gone, but I don't drive due to seizures, and I'm in Manhattan. So if you could ever make it out to K-State, I would love to go see you speak. If you could ever do that, but they were doing that, and one of them asked me, says, "Is this the stuff you're teaching? They're teaching you here at K-State?" I go, "No, this is stuff I learned on my own because when I left the faith, I'm a history person. I'm like, okay, where did all these stories come from? Where can we trace them back to? And I started doing my research, and it's just everything like the Gardening. I was able to trace as far back as the Zoroastrians because they have a very similar story on that.
Oh, look at Satan.
Oh,
Trace Satan back to the Zoroastrians. Skips Judaism altogether. The
yeah,
Jews, according to like practically every scholar on this, that Jews got almost their entire religion from the Zoroastrians.
I
But
would
one thing
believe
they
that.
didn't get was the concept of Satan, and Satan character reappears in Christianity, having skipped their religion entirely, but again, adopted straight from Zoroastrianism.
Yeah, yeah, and Satan was. I did a lot of digging on him, and it's just like it was like a giant wild goose chase. I felt because it was like, well, you have this person here who's similar, and then you have this one here and this one here. And it's like, where I can't trace it back. There's so many variations of it. But the next question, and it kind of revolves around science as well, is what's the difference between a law and a theory? Because I always get the whole, well, that's
Oh,
a
yeah, I'd
theory,
be happy to
and
help you with
the
that.
whole and that, but the law of gravity is real. When I point out gravity is a theory as well, and they go, but evolution is just a theory. I get that one a lot, so I
Yeah,
always
this is
struggle on which one is which and how it works. So
now some people will put law equal to theory, but
okay,
it's not really. I mean, I've seen a lot of references actually that put law equal to theory in different in the same philosophy. But a law is a summary of certain natural elements. We're talking about a law of nature. That a law is a summary statement, either as a short sentence or a mathematical equation, which is always true under specific circumstances. One of the many laws of gravity is that matter attracts matter, or you could say that everything that goes up, whatever goes up, must come down. This could actually be interpreted as a law of gravity. But there's several laws of gravity, including the Newtonian laws of motion and relativity, which is integrated with that, which is a whole different theory, but still has laws within itself that also integrate into gravity, because Newtonian gravity doesn't explain certain things, the eccentric
yeah,
orbit of Mercury, for example.
yeah,
But a theory is entirely different. A theory, to understand it in a colloquial sense, a theory is a hypothesis that has been effectively proven. So if you have a hypothesis and people will say, well, you can't prove a theory. Well, that's true. There's a law or there's a rule that you can't prove a theory positively. You can only disprove a theory.
yeah.
But the same thing, you can only prove a hypothesis. You can disprove a hypothesis. You can't prove it positively. But when you have a hypothesis that has withstood a significant or substantial battery of tests in peer review and has withstood every test without any contradiction, at some point it becomes perverse to call it a hypothesis because it has been so well substantiated. It begins to graduate to the level of theory. And theory is a field of study or body of knowledge of what is essentially a hypothesis that has been effectively proven. So, if you want to say that what a fact is a objectively verifiable data. But that's what also a theory is. It's a hypothesis that has graduated to the point where it would be obscene or perverse to try to say that it's just a guess. This is something we know and can show to be true. So, in colloquial terms, not mathematical or scientific terms, but in colloquial terms, a theory is a hypothesis that has been effectively proven.
All right. And if any, what do you feel is the greatest positive of religion? Religion in general, and why, if any?
I'm going to say no. There's none.
Okay.
It's lying to oneself, and it's wholly detrimental. That at best you can get a placebo effect, and that's the closest to positive. And I won't say that that's positive that you can get out of it. Religion is a net negative against humanity. Faith is the actual issue, but faith is the cause of all of these pseudoscience and religion and a number of other ills that we need to get rid of.
Okay. And obviously, the flip side of that question is, what do you feel is the greatest negative of religion, and why?
It's faith.
Faith.
Faith is the most dishonest position it is possible to have. It is an auto-deceptive delusion that is a great way to stay wrong forever without realizing that you are wrong, and it's a way to prevent yourself from ever knowing what the truth is.
And you kind of already answered this one as no, but I'll ask it just to make sure. It says, do you feel religion itself poses any benefits at all to society?
None.
I had a feeling that.
Yeah.
Oh, the last three questions I have is, what is your favorite argument to go after on religion? Like one that it's just like when you see it, it's like, ooh, I really enjoy taking this one apart.
I like the morality argument because everybody, even the most repugnant, reprehensible bastages, are still more moral than their God.
Yeah.
So you can always cite something in the Bible that pushes beyond everybody else's envelope about how horrible and atrocious bastard you can be. And they just have to realize that, this is what your God endorses and condones and permits and promotes. You don't. That means you're more moral than your God is.
Yeah. The next one is obviously the other flip side of that question is, what is your least favorite argument? Like when it comes to like, oh God, not again.
That would be probably the theory argument that we just brought up.
Okay.
That's why it was the last chapter of my book, because that's the one that irks me the most. It's the one that creationists know is inaccurate. They know it for certain that that's wrong, but they use that argument anyway. So they know they're lying.
And the next and the final question I have, and I guess we won't really get into the audience question because we kind of went over how long I was thinking this was going to take. But it was still a good discussion. I love the parts that we did talk on that were kind of off topic. And it is, what is your most memorable person you have debated or talked to besides Kent Hovind, and why?
Bob Dutko.
Okay.
Yeah, Bob Dutko. I challenged him on a radio show to name one thing that we could prove was correct, or that we could verify. Anything that he believed that we could actually verify to be true or false. And he named this thing, this archaeological evidence of dinosaurs living alongside man. And the beautiful thing about that was that what he cited was something that has been known to be a fraud since the 1930s. And he cited it anyway. And I did a blog post about it when I got a chance to look it up. And I know that Bob Duco's subscribers are not going to follow my lead to go look up the source, but they should, because he was lying his ass off. Now, I forget. Please forgive me. I'm going to have to run for just a minute. I'll be right back. I've got something that just came up. So talk to your audience for just a moment. I'll be right back.
I will do that. And I was kind of looking at their chat here, so I'll address one of the points here while we wait for Aron to come back. And that was between, it looks like, Reese and Atheistic Snail. I'll address your points on Lilith. With that, she was not Lilith. I was only able, and if you have information, I would love to see it on this, Reese or Atheistic Snail. What I was able to trace her back to was Jewish mythology as Adam's first wife. And from there, she basically said, no, I'm not going to submit to Adam, and basically got away and kind of became the first demon. So that's where I was able to trace that. Sumeria actually was a pretty large area, Terry. It was kind of in the Iraq area, I believe. Oh, she was Sumerian first, Reese? Okay, I mean, if you have something on that, I would love to see it. Because like I said, I could be wrong, but that's as far as I was able to trace her back. But Sumeria was a rather large area that encompassed a lot of land, and then it kind of broke up. So, and it looks like Aron's back. So,
Yeah,
welcome.
sorry about that, but
No,
I'm
you're
very
fine.
relieved to have taken care of that.
No, you're fine. And that was actually kind of the end um of actually the interview, and I was just addressing one of the points
That was the end of the
on
interview.
Facebook. Yeah, that was the last question I had was who was your favorite one to debate and why? But you did say you had some questions for me, so if you want to, we can
No,
do that
no,
off
no.
air if you want to ask
I
them.
had questions for you about the trans thing, but that wasn't something I
Yeah,
wanted to take up on this show.
no, that's what I was saying. After we ended, if you wanted to, we could talk about it offline.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with
Unfortunately, I've got other tasks that
Oh,
require immediate
okay.
attention. So
Okay. All right. So I will let you get going. Thank you for joining me today, Aaron. It was a real honor to meet with you. If you do ever want to talk on that or have the question you want to just sit down and talk or do a show on it or whatever, I would be well. You know how to get a hold of me. So
yeah, well, much
um,
appreciated.
yeah, no problem. I mean, I'm open about talking about being trans and everything I went through. So I mean, to me, the best way to combat the ignorance that I know I face for being trans and people who just don't understand it and therefore try to fight against me to allow me to be myself. I mean, the best way to do it is by being open and talking to people
Yeah,
about it.
yeah.
So
I feel very fortunate in that I'm very, I guess the word is cis. I
yeah,
mean, kind of
oh,
extremely so.
yeah,
And so I remember watching a documentary once upon a time that said that this was back in like the early '80s, and it said that in the 21st century everybody would be bi, and I remember thinking, not this guy.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Um,
I now realize that now that we're in the 21st century that I'm actually kind of an oddity in that I am completely cis and hetero.
yeah,
That
and that's
seems to
fine.
be unusual now.
Yeah, I mean, there's like generally like a spectrum of it, and that, and I mean, and that's fine. I'm, you know,
It actually compromises my ability to understand alternative perspectives
okay,
or varying perspectives, and I realize that this is actually an impediment on my ability to understand.
okay, yeah. But again, thank you for joining me today. You have been a big influence for me, on YouTube and just, being an atheist and actually being more outspoken on it. So I do thank you for that. So yeah, anyone who's subscribed to my channel and likes my content, you have this guy here to thank for me being on YouTube doing this stuff. So, and when you said yes, I'm not gonna lie, I was like, yes, yes, Aaron's gonna be on. Aaron's gonna be on. I was so excited for it. Again, thank you for joining me, and everybody, please remember to always question with boldness.